I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who lose her son to another woman. That sounds dramatic, I know, but sitting here now in this small apartment in Portland, Oregon, with the rain drumming against the window like it's trying to tell me something, I can't help but think about how naive I was, how blind. They say a mother's love is unconditional, and maybe that's true. But what they don't tell you is that unconditional love can make you stupid. It can make you ignore the signs, the little cruelties, the slow, deliberate erasure of your place in your own son's life. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how I survived my own murder. It started small, the way these things always do. My son David married Rachel Summers in June of 2019 at a vineyard in Willamette Valley. It was beautiful. She was beautiful. Tall, blonde, with one of those smiles that could light up a room or cut through you like a knife, depending on her mood. I remember standing in the reception hall, watching them dance, and feeling this strange twist in my stomach. Not jealousy exactly. Something else. Something I couldn't name. David had always been a good boy. Kind. Thoughtful. After his father died in 2011, he'd been my rock. He called every Sunday, took me to dinner once a month, made sure I wasn't alone on holidays. But after the wedding, things changed. The calls became less frequent, once a week, then every other week. The dinners stopped altogether. When I asked about it, he'd say Rachel had plans. Rachel's family was visiting. Rachel needed him for something. Always Rachel. I tried to be understanding. New marriages need space. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the one who clings and interferes. So I backed off. I gave them room. I told myself it was temporary. By the fall of 2020, I barely saw him at all. We lived in the same city, Portland, but it might as well have been different continents. He worked as a software engineer at a tech company downtown. She was in real estate, successful, aggressive, always closing deals. They bought a house in the West Hills, one of those modern places with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Mount Hood on clear days. I lived in my small house in Selwood, the same one where David grew up, the same one where my husband Tom and I had built our life together. After Tom died, David had wanted me to sell it, to move into something smaller, easier to maintain. But I couldn't. It held too many memories. In November 2020, Rachel called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making tea when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I'd been feeling tired lately, run down, the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones and won't leave. Margaret, it's Rachel. She never called me Mom, always Margaret. Hi, Rachel, how are you? Good, good. Listen, I wanted to invite you over for dinner. This Saturday. David's been saying we don't see you enough. My heart lifted. Really? That would be lovely. Great. 6 o'clock. Don't bring anything. I'll handle everything. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in months. Saturday came. I dressed carefully. A navy blue dress Tom had always liked. A string of pearls. I wanted to make a good impression, to show Rachel I could be the kind of mother-in-law she'd want around. The drive to their house took 20 minutes. The rain had let up, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights. I pulled up to their driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. David answered the door. He looked good. A little thinner maybe, a little tired around the eyes, but good. Mom, he said, and hugged me. It felt stilted, formal, like hugging a stranger. Hi, sweetheart. Rachel appeared behind him, wearing a cream-colored sweater and jeans. Margaret, Come in, come in. It's freezing out there." The house smelled like roasting chicken and herbs. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. We ate in the dining room, at a long glass table that reflected the chandelier above it. The food was excellent. Rachel had made coq au vin, roasted vegetables, a salad with candied walnuts. We talked about safe things, the weather, David's work, Rachel's latest property sale. But underneath the pleasant conversation, I felt something off. Attention. David kept glancing at Rachel, like he was waiting for permission to speak. Rachel smiled constantly, but it never reached her eyes. After dinner, Rachel brought out dessert, chocolate mousse in delicate glass cups, and coffee. "I made decaf," she said, pouring from a silver carafe. "I know you don't sleep well with caffeine, Margaret." I was touched. "That's very thoughtful." She poured 3 cups, set them on the table. David took his, added cream. Rachel took hers black. I reached for mine, and then I saw it. A look. Just a flash, so quick I almost missed it. Rachel's eyes met David's. He gave a tiny nod, and in that instant I knew. I don't know how I knew. Mother's intuition. Years of reading my son's face. Something. But I knew. My hand hovered over my cup. "Actually, could I use your bathroom first?" "Of course," Rachel said smoothly. "Upstairs, second door on the right." I stood, walked toward the stairs, but I didn't go up. I stopped just out of sight in the hallway and listened. She didn't drink it. Rachel's voice low and urgent. "She will. Relax. David. My David. It needs to look natural, David. The whole point—" "I know the point. Just calm down." My legs nearly gave out. I grabbed the wall to steady myself, my mind racing. They were trying to poison me. My son, my own son. I should have run, called the police, done something rational. But I didn't. I was frozen, disbelief and horror flooding through me in equal measure. I forced myself to move, to walk upstairs to the bathroom. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, eyes wide. I looked like a ghost. Think, Margaret, think. They expected me to drink that coffee. If I didn't, they'd know I was suspicious. They might try something else, something I couldn't avoid. But if I did drink it, an idea formed. Crazy, desperate, but possible. I flushed the toilet, ran the water, and went back downstairs. They were sitting at the table, making small talk, their faces carefully neutral. "Sorry about that," I said, sitting down. "No problem," Rachel said. "Your coffee's still hot." I picked up my cup. My hands were steady. I was surprised by that. "Rachel, could you get me some sugar? I know I usually don't take it, but I'm in the mood for something sweet." "Of course." She stood, walked toward the kitchen. The moment her back was turned, I switched my cup with David's. It took less than 2 seconds, a quick swap, silent and smooth. David was looking at his phone, not paying attention. When Rachel returned with the sugar bowl, she didn't notice anything different. I added sugar to the coffee, David's coffee, with whatever they'd put in it, and stirred slowly. "Thank you for this evening," I said. "It means so much to see you both." Rachel smiled. "We should do it more often." I raised the cup to my lips, pretended to sip, then set it down. Delicious. We talked for another 20 minutes. I took tiny fake sips from the cup, complimenting the mousse, the meal, the house. All the while, my heart was pounding so hard I thought they must hear it. David drank his coffee, his real coffee, from my original cup, the one that was meant for me. After about 10 minutes, he started to look uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, rubbed his stomach. "You okay?" Rachel asked, her voice sharp with concern. Yeah, I don't know, feel a little off. Maybe you ate too fast, I suggested, keeping my voice light. Another 5 minutes. He stood up suddenly, swaying. He didn't finish. He collapsed. Rachel screamed. I stood up, my chair scraping back. Call 911. She was frozen, staring at David's body on the floor. He was convulsing, foam at the corners of his mouth. Rachel, call 911. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands. I knelt beside David, my son, my baby, and felt for a pulse. It was there, fast and thready. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. They burst through the door with equipment and authority, pushing me aside as they worked on him. They asked questions. What did he eat? Drink? Any allergies? Medical conditions? Rachel was hysterical, crying, clinging to me like I was a life raft. I held her, this woman who tried to kill me and felt nothing. They took David to Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. Rachel rode in the ambulance. I drove my car, following the flashing lights through the wet streets, my mind strangely calm. At the hospital, they rushed him into the emergency room. Rachel and I sat in the waiting area under fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and unreal. A doctor came out after an hour. She was young, Indian, with kind eyes and tired shoulders. Are you family? I'm his mother. This is his wife. He's stable. We pumped his stomach. He ingested a significant amount of antifreeze, ethylene glycol. If you hadn't called when you did, he'd be dead. Rachel made a choking sound. I felt cold all over. Antifreeze? I said. How would he? That's what we're trying to determine. The police will want to speak with you both. The police? Of course. 2 detectives arrived an hour later. A man and a woman, both in their 40s, wearing cheap suits and expressions that said they'd seen everything. They separated us, took our statements. I told them about the dinner, the coffee, how David had suddenly collapsed. I didn't mention switching the cups. Not yet. When they were done with me, I waited and waited. The night stretched on. Nurses moved through the hallways. Machines beeped. Someone was crying in a distant room. Finally, around 3 a.m., the female detective, her name was Ortiz, came back. Mrs. Chen, we need you to come down to the station. We have some questions. Am I under arrest? No, but we'd like to get a clearer picture of what happened tonight. I went. What else could I do? At the station, they put me in an interview room. Gray walls, metal table, that mirror that's definitely a window. I've seen enough cop shows to know the set's up. Ortiz and her partner, Martinez, sat across from me. Mrs. Chen, your son is awake. He's talking. My heart jumped. Thank God. Can I see him? Soon. First, we need to understand something. He says you gave him the coffee, that you poured it for him. I stared at her. What? He says you insisted he have the decaf, that you'd made it special. He says you handed him the cup. My mind reeled. That's not true. Rachel poured the coffee. She gave me mine. Rachel Summers says the same thing as David, that you brought your own thermos of coffee, said you'd made it at home, and specifically gave David a cup. I couldn't breathe. They'd planned this. Even the poisoning had a backup plan. If something went wrong, I'd take the fall. That's a lie, I said. They're lying. Why would they lie, Mrs. Chen? Because they tried to kill me. The coffee was meant for me. I switched the cups. Martinez leaned forward. You switched the cups? So you knew the coffee was poisoned? No, I suspected something. The way they looked at each other. I just had a feeling. A feeling. So without knowing for sure, You gave potentially poisoned coffee to your son? No, it was his coffee. I just switched. I stopped, hearing how insane it sounded. Ortiz's expression was almost pitying. Mrs. Chen, we found a bottle of antifreeze in your car, in your trunk. The world tilted. What? No, that's impossible. We have a warrant. We searched your vehicle. It was there, half empty, with your fingerprints on it. Of course, they'd planted it. Probably while I was in the bathroom. Rachel had gone to the kitchen. She could have easily slipped out to my car. This is insane, I whispered. I'm being framed. They questioned me for 6 hours. I told them everything. The deteriorating relationship with David. Rachel's sudden dinner invitation. The look I'd seen. The switched cups. They wrote it all down, their faces professionally blank. When they finally let me go, it was almost noon. They didn't arrest me, but they made it clear I was a suspect. I wasn't to leave town. I wasn't to contact David or Rachel. I drove home in a daze. My house felt empty, hollow. I made tea, my hands shaking so badly I spilled water all over the counter, and sat at the kitchen table. My son had tried to kill me, and when that failed, he'd blamed me for his own poisoning. I should have felt rage, betrayal, something hot and sharp. But all I felt was cold, a deep, bone-deep cold that wouldn't go away. The next few days were a nightmare. The story broke in the news. Local woman questioned in son's poisoning. They didn't name me, but in a city like Portland, people talk. My neighbors stopped making eye contact. Someone spray-painted "murderer" on my garage door. My lawyer, a public defender named Sharon Kim, because I couldn't afford better, was blunt. They have motive, means, and opportunity. The antifreeze in your car, your son's testimony, his wife's testimony. It doesn't look good, Margaret. I didn't do it. I believe you, but belief doesn't hold up in court. We need evidence. I didn't have evidence. I had a mother's instinct and a switched cup. David recovered. He was released from the hospital after a week. I saw him on the news, Rachel by his side, both of them looking somber and brave. He gave a statement. I'm just grateful to be alive. I'm focusing on my recovery and supporting the investigation. He didn't mention me, his own mother. The formal charges came in January 2021. Attempted murder, assault in the first degree. I was arrested at my home, handcuffed, read my rights. The neighbors watched from their windows. I spent 3 days in jail before Sharon managed to get me bail. $50,000. I had to take out a loan against my house, the house Tom and I had bought in 1985, the house where I'd raised our son. The trial was set for June. I spent the months in between in a kind of limbo. I couldn't work. I'd been a part-time librarian at the Selwood branch, but they'd let me go quietly, not wanting the controversy. My friends stopped calling. My book club asked me to leave. The people at my church, the church where I'd worshiped for 30 years, looked at me with suspicion and fear. I was a pariah, a monster, a mother who tried to kill her own child. The loneliness was crushing. I'd sit in my house, the blinds drawn, and stare at photo albums. David as a baby. David on his first day of school. David at his college. Graduation. Tom's arm around him, both of them grinning. Had I imagined that love? Had it ever been real? At night, I'd lie awake and replay that dinner. The switched cups, the look between David and Rachel. I hadn't imagined it. I knew I hadn't, but how could I prove it? Sharon did her best. She poked holes in the prosecution's case. The antifreeze bottle had only my fingerprints. not even smudges, which suggested it had been wiped clean and then pressed with my hand. The timeline was shaky. David and Rachel's stories matched too perfectly, like they'd been rehearsed. But the jury didn't care. I could see it in their faces. A middle-aged mother financially struggling, possibly resentful of her son's successful wife. A woman who'd been seen less and less by her son, who might have felt replaced. A woman with motive. The trial lasted 3 weeks. David testified. He sat in the witness box, wouldn't meet my eyes, and described how I'd given him the coffee, how I'd insisted he drink it, how he trusted me because I was his mother. Rachel testified too. She cried on the stand, talked about how much she tried to include me, to make me part of their family, how I'd seemed increasingly unstable, bitter, making comments about their marriage, their success. I listened to these lies and felt something break inside me, not my heart that had already broken, something deeper, my faith in the world, maybe, in justice, in truth. Sharon put me on the stand. I told my story. I saw the jury's skepticism. One woman in the front row actually rolled her eyes when I described switching the cups. The verdict came on June 18, 2021. Guilty. All charges. I was sentenced to 15 years in Oregon State Correctional Institution. I don't remember much about the next part. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters shouting questions, Rachel crying dramatically, David looking stoic and wounded. Sharon was saying something about appeals. The judge was banging her gavel. Guards were putting handcuffs on me, leading me out. I looked back once. David was watching me, and for just a second I saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, regret, or just satisfaction that he'd gotten away with it. Then he looked away, and I was gone. Prison is exactly as bad as you think it is, and worse in ways you can't imagine. The noise, the smell, the constant threat of violence. I was 64 years old, a librarian, in a world of women who'd done things I couldn't comprehend. I kept to myself. I didn't make friends. I spent my days in the library. They had one, small and underfunded, but it was something, and my nights lying on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. Sharon filed appeals. They were all denied. She was apologetic, frustrated. The system failed you, Margaret. I'm so sorry. I didn't blame her. She'd done what she could. 3 months into my sentence, I got a visitor. Not David. He never came, never wrote. Not Rachel, obviously. A woman I didn't know. Her name was Patricia Nguyen. She was in her 50s, Vietnamese, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She introduced herself as a private investigator. I don't have money for a private investigator, I said through the plexiglass barrier. I'm not asking for money. I'm doing this pro bono. Why? She hesitated. Because I lost my mother to a similar situation. Someone framed her. By the time the truth came out, she'd already died in prison. I can't save her, but maybe I can save you. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but I'd learned not to hope. What do you think you can find? I asked. Evidence. There's always evidence. It's just a matter of looking. She came back 2 weeks later, and then 2 weeks after that. Each time she had updates. She'd interviewed my old neighbors. Some of them admitted they'd seen Rachel at my house the week before the dinner, which was odd because Rachel claimed she'd never visited me at home. She'd pulled David and Rachel's financial records. They were drowning in debt, leveraged to the hilt on that house, Rachel's real estate business struggling. Motive? I had life insurance. Not a lot, 100,000, but enough. And I'd made David the beneficiary. If you died of apparent natural causes, antifreeze poisoning can look like kidney failure or a heart attack if it's not tested for specifically. David would have gotten that money, Patricia explained, plus your house. You don't have a will, so everything would go to him as next of kin. It made horrible sense, but none of it was proof. It was all circumstantial, suggestive, not enough for a new trial. Then, in December 2021, Patricia hit gold. A woman named Sheila Morris came forward. She was a nurse at the hospital where David had been treated. She'd been on duty that night, had overheard something in the chaos. Rachel, on her phone in the hallway, thinking she was alone. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, she switched them. I don't know how. We need to stick to the story. Sheila had thought it was strange, but in the moment, with the emergency, she hadn't processed it. Later, when she'd heard about my conviction, it had nagged at her. She'd finally decided to come forward. Patricia brought this to Sharon. Sharon filed for a new trial based on new evidence. It took 8 months. 8 months of legal wrangling, of prosecution fighting to keep the conviction, of media attention swirling back up. In August 2022, a judge granted the motion. New trial. I was released on bail again, pending the trial. Walking out of that prison into the summer sun felt surreal. I'd aged years in those 14 months. My hair had gone completely gray. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Patricia picked me up. She drove me back to Portland, to my house. Someone, I never found out who, had maintained it while I was gone. The lawn was mowed, the bills were paid. It was like walking into a museum of my old life. The new trial was scheduled for November. This time it was different. Sheila Morris testified. Patricia presented her findings. Sharon was fierce, relentless, tearing apart the prosecution's case. And David cracked. He was on the stand, being cross-examined. And Sharon pushed. Mr. Chan, isn't it true that you and your wife were facing foreclosure? That you needed money desperately? That's not, we were managing. Managing? You were 3 months behind on your mortgage. Your credit cards were maxed out. You were drowning. And your mother had life insurance with you as the beneficiary. That doesn't mean you invited her to dinner with the intention of poisoning her. You or your wife put antifreeze in her coffee, but she switched the cups. You drank the poison meant for her. And then, to cover your crime, you blamed her. No, you let your mother go to prison for something you did. Your own mother. And David broke. Right there, in front of everyone. He started crying, shaking, and the words spilled out. I didn't want to. Rachel said we had no choice. We were going to lose everything. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted it to be over quickly. I thought she wouldn't suffer. I thought... The courtroom exploded. The judge was banging for order. Rachel was screaming at David to shut up. And I just sat there, feeling nothing. My son had tried to kill me. And now, finally, everyone knew it. The charges against me were dropped. David and Rachel were arrested immediately. Their trial was swift. David's confession made it open and shut. He got 20 years. Rachel got 25 for masterminding the plan and framing me. I was free, but freedom doesn't feel the way you think it will. I returned to my house, to my life, and found that nothing fit anymore. The people who'd shunned me were suddenly apologetic, wanting to make amends. I didn't want their apologies. The library offered me my job back. I declined. I sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many memories of a son who stopped being mine long before he tried to kill me. I moved to a small apartment in Portland's Pearl District near the river. I got a cat, a tabby I named Tom. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping those who'd been betrayed by people they loved. I understood them. They understood me. I never visited David in prison. He wrote me letters, dozens of them, full of apologies and excuses and pleas for forgiveness. I read the first one. I burned the rest. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some wounds don't heal. It's January 2023 now. I'm 66 years old. I live a quiet life. I take walks along the waterfront. I read. I watch the river and think about how water keeps moving, no matter what. It doesn't dwell. It doesn't regret. It just flows. People ask me sometimes, people who know my story, how I survived, how I'm not angry. But I am angry. I'm furious. I'm heartbroken. I'm 100 different painful things all at once. But I'm also alive. I survived my own son's attempt to murder me. I survived being framed, imprisoned, destroyed. I survived. And some days, that's enough. On clear mornings, I can see Mount Hood from my apartment window. It stands there, massive and indifferent, covered in snow that never melts at the peak. It was there before me. It'll be there after. There's something comforting in that. Something that makes my own tragedy feel smaller, more bearable. I make tea, I feed Tom, I watch the mountain, and I keep living.